Yes, we are. Welcome to the MT Pharmacy. There's nothing on the shelves because we wanted to show what modern medicine would be like without clinical trials.
Hi, my name's Lester, and since I can remember, my mother she has diabetes, and she's been fighting it for years.
Clinical trials are medical research studies involving patients. They can help discover new medicines or get improved versions of existing medicines.
My brother was diagnosed with appendix cancer at the age of 46. The type of tumor that he has is called a signet ring cell carcinoma. I think there's only like a very small percentage of people in the United States that have survived from it. So that type of cancer, I would really love for there to be a cure for.
They help us find out if a treatment can work in patients. We'd like to fill these shelves a bit like how clinical trials fill the shelves in a regular pharmacy.
For Teddy.
I wrote on my box addiction. I wrote it for family and friends, and it's good to get the awareness out because a lot of people don't take addiction seriously.
I use 7 boxes because I put down cures for different reasons. I use HIV and AIDS because that's been out here for a long time.
I picked cancer for my box because my mother was a victim of cancer. She died of the year 2008. I was the age of 9 years old.
I never really thought about clinical trials. I guess I just thought it was for people who had cancer or something serious like that.
I didn't realize everything needed to be tested.
I think this is a good concept. I think it gets people talking.
This store is a great idea. I've actually never thought about the fact that without clinical trials, we wouldn't have any of the medicines that we take every single day.
Imagine if you had a life-threatening disease that there's no cure for. What would you do? Or if you could help create a new medical therapy for someone you love that has a serious illness, what would it be? And for whom? I've been in clinical research for over 35 years, and I'm very passionate about finding new medical therapies for people, all people. I'm particularly passionate about finding a cure for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease for my dear friend and for all caregivers out there. I know how difficult it is for not only the patients, but for the loved ones as well. Do you know the first person that's cured of any of these diseases will be someone that participates in a clinical trial? Simply because currently there's no cures. So these brave clinical trial participants will be trying something that hasn't been approved by the FDA for the first time that may or may not be the answer. But if it does work, not only will they benefit, but everyone who has the same disease all over the world for years to come will benefit once these new medications become approved. A very heartfelt thank you to all the clinical trial participants out there. We call them heroes. We are forever grateful for your courageous contributions. The world became very familiar with clinical trials with the COVID pandemic. Overnight, we all became patients with an unmet need, living in fear every day that we might get a condition that there's no cure or quick fix for. We face the reality that it takes a lot of time to get new medications to patients. In fact, it can take up to 14 years. COVID underscored the complications, the regulations, the politics, the difficulties in commercializing and distributing new medical therapies. Do you remember how difficult it was to find a COVID test, let alone get treatment? While we're very fortunate to have the health care we have in our country, can we do better? What happens if another pandemic occurs? How do we remain resilient? While we can't predict what we don't know, we can focus on what we do know and leverage that to be prepared. So what do we know? We know it takes a long time to find a cure and get it to patients. We know that our healthcare system is fragmented, and many times individual needs can fall through the cracks. We know that, at least in the case of COVID, over 50% of the deaths occurred in people that are suffering with more than 2 chronic conditions. And we also know that there is a lot of people in our country that suffer from chronic disease. In fact, 86% of our healthcare dollar goes to managing people with chronic disease. Over 50% of our population has at least one chronic condition, and at least 25%, actually more than 25%, have over 2 chronic conditions. And we know chronic disease, or at least the severity of it, could be prevented if we just took accountability for our own health. So, what does that mean? Well, it means it's up to you. We can have the most sophisticated medical treatments in the world, but if you're not taking care of yourself or leveraging the support that's available to you, none of this really matters. Benjamin Franklin once said it best: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But what does prevention mean in healthcare? Well, we all know how to take care of ourselves, but are we really doing it? Eating healthy, getting enough exercise, getting enough sleep, taking time to be mindful. All these things are ways and routines to help us prevent onset of chronic disease. And it turns out, if we focused on preventing chronic disease just as much as we focused on curing disease, we can minimize the burden of chronic illness simply by preventing it from happening in the first place. How do we do that? Well, we can start out by tracking our daily routines, and you might be very surprised. There's a lot of ways we can track our diet, our exercise, our stress, our sleep these days. And this is all important information if we're going to try to build better habits. Our healthcare system also tracks our health with various electronic healthcare records, but if you're going to multiple physicians, sometimes a lot of that data can get lost. So it's so important to not only track your daily routines, but your healthcare data. Make this a habit. You cannot change what you don't measure. This changed my life in many ways, but it all started with a good friend of mine who's a marathon runner, and I can never run more than a couple of miles. And she said, Lisa, just track every second of your run and add 1 minute each day, just 1 minute. And before I knew it, I was running a half marathon in Paris. The same concept applies to other aspects of our health. If you or your doctor don't really have your basic information, how do you really know what your needs are? Okay, I'm feeling a little tired. I guess I gained 10 pounds, but I eat healthy, I exercise. But in reality, you're forgetting to track that you eat about a half box of sugar cookies a day. You think you're exercising, but the last time you really exercised was 2 weeks ago. And you think you're getting enough sleep, but you're actually only sleeping 3 hours a night. This is important information to manage your health, and it can only come from you. We can't decide our future, but we can decide our habits. And ultimately, it's our habits that decide our future. Good, healthy habits, daily habits, are the road to a healthier and happier life. And the healthier we each are, the more healthy and resilient we all become. Prevention is the how to become resilient. And if we're resilient, we're not dependent on a healthcare system, an insurance company, or a clinical trial to dictate our health. And the mind-body-spirit connection is such a critical role in all of this. Please, if you're feeling depressed or anxious or fatigued, please ask for help. Please, it's so important to pay attention how you're feeling. And always remember that your body hears everything your mind says. So be kind to your body, and don't be afraid to embrace discipline and sometimes tough love. When the rogue wave of a pandemic or a war or an accident crashes in, having a balanced mind, body, and spirit is the best chance of our survival. We can handle anything life presents to us, both physically and mentally. And quick fixes are not the answer. Vaping, drugs, alcohol, fad diets, social media, you name it. It's great for a few minutes, but what happens when that instant gratification is gone? We're back to where we were before, or in many cases, fast-forwarding ourselves into addiction, obesity, depression, anxiety. When I was planning to go to medical school, I wanted to go to medical school because at the time, medicine was an art. But today, healthcare is an art. And the artist is you, but you're also the canvas. You decide how healthy you want to be. You decide how you're feeling. You decide how strong you are. And art is also a self-discovery, and that's the first step. It's so important to identify what your needs are and learn how to address them. When I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, or anytime I have a tough moment, my mantra is always, one more step, one more step. And when it gets tough, it's be bright, right now. And that second becomes the next minute, the next hour, the next day, the next week. And before I know it, it prevented me from breaking down. My mind creates my resilience, and my body hears my mind. My mind creates my resilience. My body hears my mind. That was me, about 6 years ago. I almost died. I was rushed to the ER, passed out, said I had vertigo. But what I really had was a serious heart condition as a result of an undiagnosed case of Lyme disease. When I got to the ER, I asked the nurse to get me a computer so I could bring up all the test results I had from numerous physicians and numerous healthcare organizations to try to figure out what was wrong with me. But by the time she tried to get the computer, my heart rate got down to almost 0, and they rushed me up to the ICU. But there was time enough for them to get the results. Had they not seen my results, I probably would not be alive today. There's no time for test in that situation. So I was resilient. I took ownership of my own health. I engaged with and challenged the healthcare professionals, and as a result, I was resilient in the state of my own crisis, and it saved my life. Yes, even with the best healthcare professionals that we're so fortunate to have, sometimes things can fall through the cracks. People have died because of unintentional misdiagnosis or lack of information, and you could too. Please take ownership of your own health. It's an unknown world out there, but you know you. Clinical trials can lead us to new medical therapies and cures, but you lead yourself to resilience. Thank you.